Now, good morning, everybody. Now, we will be starting with the next chapter, that is time of supply. Now, here, why we determine the time of supply? The liability to pay GST. The liability to pay GST arises at the time of supply. So, basically, time of supply chapter is important, as you are aware that liability to pay GST arises at the time of supply. In this particular chapter, we will be discussing the provisions of Section 12 of the CGST Act. Section 12, it contains the provisions relating to determination of time of supply in respect of goods. It is what? Determination of time of supply in respect of goods. Then we are having Section 13. Section 13 contains the provisions relating to determination of time of supply in respect of services. And we are having Section 14. Section 14 contains the provisions relating to how you will be determining the time of supply in case of change in rate of tax. Determining time of supply in case of change in rate of tax. So here, the liability to pay GST arises at the time of supply. Basically, it's a point of taxation. Now, in this particular chapter, we will be discussing these provisions. And here, the time of supply is also dependent on the date of issuance of invoice. So, we will be first of all discussing invoice provisions. What is the time limit to issue invoice? Here we have to discuss the same because time of supply is dependent on that also. So let us start with the same. First of all, we will be discussing about the invoice provisions. Then we will be going for Section 12. Then we will be going for Section 13. Separate provisions have been made for determination of time of supply in respect of goods and services. Therefore, 12 and 13, and then we will go with Section 14. It's a very simple chapter. It's not a difficult chapter, but you have to remember it. So, basically the time of supply fixes the point when the liability to pay GST arises, when you will be liable to pay GST. That has been determined by whom? The time of supply. It also indicates when a supply is deemed to have been made. It also indicates what? When a supply is, say, deemed to have been made. And it's important to note that though the liability to pay tax arises at a time of supply, the same can be paid to the treasury of the government by the due dates. Now, basically what due date is? Due date as such is not mentioned, but we are required to deposit the tax on or before the due date of filing our return of GST. So it may be, we have to deposit, monthly return is to be filed by 20th of the month, of 20th of the next month, or quarterly return is to be filed. In that case, tax is to be paid, say, on monthly basis. In case of composition suppliers, tax is to be paid on, say, quarterly basis by 18th of the month succeeding the quarter. Depending upon that time, you have to pay the tax. But liability to pay that tax arises at the point of supply, or that is the time of supply. The time of supply basically fixes the point when the liability to pay the GST arises. It also indicates when a supply is, say, deemed to have been made. So though the liability to pay tax arises at a time of supply, but the same can be paid to the treasury of the government by the due dates prescribed with reference to the said time of supply. So for example, if the time of supply is, say, 25th of May, you have to deposit the tax by the due date of furnishing the return for the month of May, that is by 20th of June. Okay. Now, as you are aware, the time of supply is dependent upon what? The issuance of invoice provisions, time limit for issuance of invoice provisions. So we will first discuss the relevant aspect. Section 31 is dealing with the provisions relating to tax invoice. If you make a supply, you are required to issue a tax invoice. Now, what is the time limit? What is the time limit? What is the time limit for issuance of tax invoice? What is the time limit for issuance of what? Tax invoice. So, what is the time limit for issuance of tax invoice? Here, say, when we discuss about the supplier of goods, the supplier of goods, and they are making supply of goods, and where movement of goods is involved, by virtue of the supply, there is a movement of goods. Then the invoice must be issued on or before the removal of goods. So by virtue of supply, contract has been entered on, say, 15th of July. Contract has been entered on 15th of July to supply 1000 kg of product X. And they have manufactured the same on 20th of July. And the removal takes place, the removal of the said goods takes place on, say, 25th of July. So here the invoice must be issued. On or before 25th of July, or before, say, making the goods available to the recipient. If the supply does not involve movement of goods, if the supply is on as on where basis sale, then here basically what will be the time limit? That is before making the goods available to the recipient or before delivering the goods to the recipient, okay, invoice is to be made. So a registered person supplying taxable goods shall issue invoice before or at the time of removal of goods, for supply to recipient where supply involve movement of the goods, before removal or at the time of removal where the supply involves, say, movement of the goods, or say delivery of goods or making available thereof to the recipient, in, say, any other case, before delivery of goods or at the time of delivery of goods or making available thereof to the recipient in any other case. Then, say, in case of continuous supply of goods, we have continuous supply of goods, say gas is supplied through pipeline. This comes under the ambit of, say, continuous supply of goods. Okay. In case of continuous supply of goods, where successive statement of accounts or successive payments are involved. In case of continuous supply of goods, where successive accounts or successive payments are, say, involved. in that particular circumstance, the invoice is to be issued. Invoice is required to be issued before, say, or at a time. Before or at a time, each such successive statement is issued. Each such successive statement is issued, or as the case may be, each such, say, payment has been received, or each such payment has been received. Now, continuous supply of goods basically is what? Goods which are provided continuously or on recurrent basis. Here, continuous supply of goods means what? Supply of goods. It means what? Supply of goods which is provided or agreed to be provided, which is provided or say agreed to be provided continuously or on, say, recurrent basis under a contract, whether or not by means of wire, cable, pipeline or other conduit, and for which the supplier invoices the recipient on regular or say periodic basis. So, supply of goods which is provided or agreed to be provided continuously or on recurrent basis under a contract, whether or not by means of wire, cable, pipeline or the conduit, for which the supplier invoices the recipient on regular or periodic basis, and it includes what? Supply of goods such as the government may, subject to such conditions as it may by notification specify. Then we come to what? If the goods are sent on approval. We seen a sale on approval basis. So, here if supply takes place within a period of 6 months from the date of removal, if supply takes place within a period of 6 months from the date of removal, then the invoice must be issued before or at the time of supply. But if the recipient does not appropriate the same and 6 months have passed on, so immediately after the expiry of 6 months, the supply takes, it is deemed that you have supplied the same and you will be required to issue the invoice in respect of the same. Okay. Here, when the goods being sent or taken on approval, excuse me, when the goods being sent on taken on approval basis for sale or return, they are removed before the supply takes place. They are removed before the supply takes place. Then in that particular circumstance, the invoice shall be issued. The invoice shall be issued before or at the time of supply. Before or at the time of supply, or say 6 months from the date of removal. 6 months from the date of removal, whichever is say earlier. 6 months from the date of removal, whichever is say earlier. Now let us discuss about what? These were what? The invoice provisions in respect of goods. In respect of services also we will discuss. The here invoice is to be issued within 30 days. Within 30 days from provision of service for completion of basically supply of service. But in case of banking companies, financial institutions, NBFCs, insurance companies, banking companies, financial institutions, NBFCs, the same is to be issued within say 45 days. The same is to be issued within 45 days. So that we will be discussing afterwards. So initially what we have discussed here is the basic provisions relating to what? Determination of time limit for issuance of invoice in respect of the goods. Now we start with section 12. Section 12, it is dealing with the provisions relating to determination of time of supply in respect of goods. Section 12 is dealing with the provisions relating to determination of time of supply in respect of goods. So here section 12 subsection 2, it provides determination of time of supply in case goods are covered under forward charge mechanism. If the goods are covered under forward charge mechanism, Then 12.3 is dealing with the provisions relating to determination of time of supply in case of goods under reverse charge mechanism. If the goods are chargeable to tax under RCM, how you will be determining? That has been, say, governed by the provisions of section 12, subsection 3. Then, in case of vouchers, if you issue vouchers, how you will be determining the time of supply? That has been provided in section 12, subsection 4. 12.4 deals with the provisions relating to what? Determination of time of supply in respect of, say, vouchers. That is basically dealing with the provisions relating to what? Determination of time of supply in respect of the vouchers. Then 12.5. Then 12.5. Basically, section 12, subsection 5, it is dealing with the provisions relating to time of supply in residuary cases. Then, if supplier receives addition in value, when the supplier receives addition in value, how you will be determining this is interest, penalty, etc. That has been governed by the provisions of section 12.6. That has been governed by the provisions of section 12.6. So these provisions will be discussed by us. So let us begin. First of all, for determination of time of supply in respect of goods, what subsection 1 of section 12 provides? Subsection 1 of section 12 provides that the liability to pay tax, on goods, the liability to pay tax on goods shall arise, the same shall arise at the time of supply, as determined in accordance with the provisions of this section. So why we are determining time of supply? We are determining time of supply because the liability to pay GST, arises at the time of supply. Liability to pay GST arises at the time of supply. Liability to pay GST arises at a time of supply. Now, in case the goods are covered under forward charge mechanism, what is forward charge? Where supplier is required to pay GST. That is forward charge. Where the supplier is required to pay GST. So, time of supply of goods under forward charge mechanism. Time of supply of goods under forward charge mechanism, that is what? Normal supply of goods. That is, say, normal supply of goods. Now, basically, in normal circumstances, what they are saying, the time of supply is what? As statoutory provisions say, it is the date of invoice or the last date when the invoice was required to be issued in accordance with provisions of the Act. The last date when the invoice was required to be issued in accordance with the provisions of the Act, or date of payment, whichever is, say, earlier. What is date of payment? When the payment is entered in the books of accounts, when payment is entered in books of accounts, or when the same is credited in bank account. When the same is credited in bank account, which I will say earlier. So basically, a separate notification has been issued in regard to what? If any advance is received. If any advance is received, then on those advances, GST will not be liable to be paid, except in case of online, online gaming services. So fundamentally, the time of supply of goods, shall be earlier of the following dates. What statoutory provisions say? We are discussing the same. 12.2 clause A provides that it is the date of issue of invoice by the supplier. It is the date of issue of invoice by the supplier. It is the date of issue of invoices by the supplier, or the last date, on which he is required under section 31. Last date on which he is required under section 31 to issue invoice with respect to supply. To issue invoice with respect to supply, last date to issue invoice with respect to supply, or the date when the supplier receives the payment in respect of such supply, earlier of the same. And what is the determination of date when the supplier receives the payment? Determination of date when the supplier receives the payment. So the date on which the supplier receives the payment, date of payment. What is date of payment here? Say he has entered that he has received the payment on 25th of July in books, and that is through an instrument which is to be credited in bank account, and a check is credited in bank account on 28th of July. What will be the date of payment? That is the date when the payment is recorded in the books, or the date when the payment is credited in bank account, whichever is earlier. So here date of payment will be 25th of July. So for the purpose of clause B, the date when the supplier receives the payment shall be what? The date when on which the payment is entered in the books of accounts. The date on which the payment is entered in the books of accounts, or the date when the payment is credited to his bank account, say, whichever is earlier. Date when the payment is credited to the bank account, which is earlier. Now, if you receive any advance, a notification has been issued. That means what? Advance. If you are receiving advance before issuance of invoice, time of supply as per the statoutory provisions is the date of invoice, or the last date on which the invoice was required to be issued, or the date of payment, say, which I say earlier. Now, say for example, if date of invoice is 15th of July, it is issued in accordance with the timelines. Date of payment is 10th of July. So you have received an advance. Services supplied afterwards. So goods are supplied afterwards. But you have received an advance. So here on advance also you are required to pay GST, but separately a notification was issued. A notification was issued which was providing exemption. This notification has been issued and amended with effect from 1st of October 23. So what they say is exemption to all taxpayers on advances received in respect of supply of goods. Tax on supply of goods is to be paid on invoice basis and not on receipt basis. Advances are basically not liable to GST, except, as you know, actionable claims are goods. And specified actionable claims such as online gaming, etc. Online gaming, lottery, all these are covered under the ambit of specified actionable claims. Here, on advances, GST is to be paid. Otherwise, for other goods, GST is not required to be paid. So what they say is registered person who did not opt for composition levy, because on composition levy, tax is levied, tax is charged on basis of the turnover, on basis of turnover. Whatever is your turnover in state or union territory, tax is levied, composition rate is applied on the same. So therefore, they have excluded whom? The composition supplier, who do not pay tax under section 10. Other than registered person making what? Specified actionable claims as defined under making supply of specified actionable claims. For specified actionable claims, this notification will not be applicable. Their time of supply will be determined as per the provisions of section 12. TOS will be determined as per section 12. In respect of the same, and advances GST will be payable. So here they say that registered person shall pay GST on outward supply of goods at a time of supply as specified in section 12(2)(a), that is date of issuance of invoices, including in the situations attracting the provisions of section 14. Section 14 is dealing with change in rate of tax, and shall accordingly furnish the details and the returns as provided in chapter 9 of the Act and the rules made thereunder, and the period prescribed for payment of tax by such class of registered persons shall be such as specified in the said Act. So in simple words, we can say that all taxpayers, except say composition suppliers, they are exempted from paying GST at the time of receipt of advance in respect of supply of goods. The entire GST will be paid at the time of issuance of invoice or the last date when the invoice was required to be issued. Besides this, a composition supplier has to pay tax, in lieu of the regular tax. He has to pay tax on an amount calculated at prescribed rates on his turnover in the state or union territory. Therefore, composition supplier is not required to pay tax on advance, as the same does not form the part of the turnover. For him also, in the basis of turnover, he is required to pay the tax. So fundamentally, advance in respect of goods, is not liable to GST. However, GST on advances received against supply of specified actionable claims with effect from 1st of October, 23, they have amended this notification, and registered persons who are engaged in making supply of specified actionable claims shall be liable to pay GST on advances received in respect of such supply. So they will be required to pay GST on advances received in respect of such supply. So let us discuss now. What we are saying is, fundamentally, except specified actionable claims, what is the time of supply in respect of goods? It is the date of issuance of invoice or the last date on which the invoice was required to be issued. When the exemption was not there, this was prevalent. That is, small advances up to 1,000 rupees. Small advances up to 1,000 rupees, the time of supply will arise in normal manner. That is what? Under section 12(2)(a). You will not be required to pay GST. So where the supplier of taxable goods, receives an amount of up to rupees 1,000. Where the supplier of taxable goods receives an amount up to rupees 1,000, in excess of the amount indicated in the tax invoice. In excess of what? The amount indicated in tax invoice. To the extent such excess amount, at the option of the said supplier, be here the time of supply, basically in respect of such excess amount, shall be what? Shall be the date of issuance of invoice in respect of such excess amount. Now here, supply is deemed to have been made. Supply is deemed to have been made to the extent covered by the invoice or covered by the payment. Now here, say, if contract was for supply of 10,000 kgs of goods, say X. Now the manufacturer supplied 2,500 kg. 2,500 kg of goods X has been supplied, and he has issued invoice for the same. So to the extent of 2,500 kg, supply is deemed to have been made. Next, say again one more consignment was removed for 5000 kg. To the extent of 5000 kg, invoice is issued, supply is say deemed to have been made. So here they say that the supply is deemed to have been made to the extent covered by the invoice or to the extent covered by the payment. For the purpose of clause A, that is date on which the supplier issues invoice with respect to supply. The date on which the supplier issues invoice in respect of supply, or clause B, that is date when the supplier receives the payment with respect to supply. Supply shall be deemed to have been made to the extent covered by the invoice, or as the case may be, the payment. Now here if we are receiving part payments, partly you have received in advance, partly you will receive subsequently. So to that extent the payment is received. Here supply is deemed to have been made. So fundamentally now what we are saying is, what is the time limit for supply in respect of goods covered under forward charge? It is the date of issuance of invoice by the supplier or the last date on which the invoice is say required to be issued by the supplier. Now relating to payments, GST will not be liable to be paid on the date of receipt of payment except in case of specified actionable claims. So when we see special procedure under 148 for payment of tax in case of goods, GST is to be paid at the time of supply of goods as specified under 12(2)(a), that is date of invoice or the last date on which the invoice is required to be issued under section 31. Effectively in case of goods, no GST will be payable in respect of the advances so received. This notation we have already discussed. Now we will be discussing certain questions in relation to the same. Let us start with the same. Determine the time of supply in each of the following independent cases in accordance with section 12 in case the supply involves a movement of the goods. Now remember here the date of removal is on 1st of October. The date of issuance of invoice is on 2nd of October. So here the last date when the invoice was required to be issued must be what? It must be 1st of October. It must be 1st of October. Date when the goods are made available to the recipient, that is 3rd of October. And date of receipt of payment is on 15th of November. What is the time of supply here? The date of issuance of invoice or the last date on which the invoice was required to be issued. So here the time of supply will be what? Time of supply will in this particular case will be 1st of October. We are not here required to see when the payment has been received because of the exemption notification that is in force. Then say here date of removal is 3rd of October. Date of invoice is 1st of October. Date when the goods are made available to the recipient is on 4th of October. Date of payment is 25th of November. Now here time of supply is what? Date of invoice or last date when invoice is required to be issued, whichever is earlier. So here it will be date of invoice is 1st of October. Date of invoice is say 1st October. Time of supply will be what? 1st of October. Time of supply will be what? 1st of October. Okay. In this case, because invoice has been issued prior to removal. Then date of removal is on 4th of November. Date of invoice is also on 4th of November. Date when the goods have been made available to the recipient and we have received payment on 1st of October. So here advance in respect of goods is not liable to GST except specified actionable claims. If it has been goods being specified actionable claims, that is online gaming, lottery, etc., time of supply will be 1st of October here. But if it is other than specified actionable claims, time of supply will be what? As per 12(2)(a), date of issuance of invoice or the last date when the invoice was required to be issued. It is date of issuance of invoice or the last date when the invoice was required to be issued. So here it will be 4th of November. Okay. So these questions we are discussing. Here also, from the following information, you are required to determine the time of supply of goods when the supply involves a movement of the goods. Now here, the removal of goods is on 10th of November. Invoice is on 16th of November. Delivery of goods is on 16th of November. Receipt of payment doesn't matter here. So what will be the time of supply? Just as above. The invoice must be issued on or before the removal. So the time of supply will be what? Date of invoice or the last date when the invoice is required to be issued. Last date when the invoice is required to be issued here is on 10th of November. The time of supply will be 10th of November. Invoice date is on 1st of November. Removal of goods is on 10th of November. Delivery of goods is on, say, 16th. And 30th is the receipt of payment, 30th December. Time of supply will be 1st of November. Time of supply will be 1st of November. Here, invoice is on 1st of December. Removal is on 1st of December. Delivery is on 4th of December. Receipt of payment is on 10th, 2011. Even if it is an interstate account stock transfer, then also here the provisions will be applicable. Now on 2011 you have received an advance. 5 lakh rupees is received as an advance. You will not be required to pay GST on the advance. Balance 620 is received on 10th of December. So here, and for entire 11,20,000 rupees, time of supply will be what? The date of invoice or the last date on which the invoice was required to be issued. Okay. So here the invoice has been issued within the timeline. 1st of December will be what? The time of supply here. Now let us discuss one more. So in first case it is 10th. Second case it is 1st of November. And for both the advances and other payment, it will be 1st of December. Now determine the time of supply in each of the following independent cases in accordance with the provisions of section 12 of the CGST Act. Date of invoices on 2nd of November. Here supply does not involve what? Movement of goods. Supply does not involve movement of goods. Goods, when the same are made available to the recipient on 3rd of October. So here invoice must be issued on or before 3rd of October. Time of supply will be here 2nd of October. In this case, 4th of October is the date of invoice. When the goods have been made available to the recipient, 1st of October. So invoice must be issued on or before 1st of October. Date of payment we are not considering because advances are not liable to GST. And next one, it is on 4th of November we have issued the invoice. Though we have received the advance payment, you will not be required to pay GST on advances in respect of goods. For services, you are required to pay the same. But in respect of goods, you are not required. Only when you are required to pay GST on advances in respect of specified actionable claims. So it will be 4th of November here will be the time of supply. The 210, 110 and 411. 210, 110 and 411. Then let us discuss one more question. Mr. X purchased certain goods from ABC a registered supplier on 15/11, we have purchased on 15/11 certain goods from registered supplier 15750, 15750. He has made payment of 16,000. Now 16,000 payment has been made with instruction to adjust the excess payment against future purchase. Hence, same was adjusted by supplier against future purchase. The same has been adjusted. Now, on future purchase on 1st of January. On 1st of January. They are asking, determine the time of implications with regard to excess payment. Now, here, with regard time of supply with respect to 15/7/50, it will arise on which date? On 15th of 11. Okay. Relating to 250 rupees advances, since it does not exceed 1000 rupees, the time of supply in respect of advance of rupees 250 will arise when? On the date when this subsequent supply has been made and invoice has been issued in this regard. So, time of supply for 250 will be on 1st of January. Then next is, during the course of search, it was found that 200 cartons of wall tiles were dispatched on 25th of August. But no invoice was made and cartons were not entered in the accounts. There was no evidence relating to receipt of payment. Now, what is the time of supply here? The date of invoice, but it has not been issued. Or the last date, when the invoice was required to be issued. So, here the last date when the invoice was required to be issued is what? On 25th of August. So, here the time of supply will be what? For 200 cartons will be 25th of August. 25th of August will be the time of supply. Now, next is relating to what? The continuous supply of goods. Say, on 1st of December, we have determined the time of supply. Invoice date is 1st of December. Removal of goods takes place on 15th and 25th of November. Now, statement of accounts and receipt of payments. So, here, when successive statement of accounts are required to be issued, the invoice must be issued on or before this particular date, on or before this date. Now, time of supply will be the date of issuance of invoice or the last date on which the invoice was required to be issued. So, here the date of issuance of invoice is on 1st of December, time of supply will arise on 1st of December. In the second case, the invoice is on 21st of January. Removal takes place on 18th and 31st of January. Statement of accounts have been given on 5th of January. And receipt of payment is on, say, 10th of February. In this particular case, since the statement of accounts have been delivered on 5th of January, the time of supply will arise on this particular date because the invoice was required to be issued on or before this 5th of January. Then one is relating to sale on approval. Here, what is the time limit for issuance of invoice? On or before the supply takes place, or say 6 months from date of invoice, the time of supply occurs. So, here date of basically removal, date of removal. Removal of goods is on 1st of December. They issue invoice on 15th of December. Now, this has been accepted by the recipient on 5th of December and payment has been made on 25th. So, here the invoice must be issued on or before the time when the supply takes place. Supply has taken place on 5th of December. Time of supply will arise on this particular date. 5th of December will be what? The time of supply in this case. In second case, the removal has been taken on 1st of December. Date of issuance of invoice is on, say, 25th of July. It is to be issued within 6 months from the date of removal. So, 6 months gets completed. Here 6 months gets completed. January, December, January, February, March, April, May. December, January, February, March, April, May. So on 1st of June, 1st of June, you must issue invoice, say up to 2nd of June, basically, up to 1st of June, and immediately after the expiry of 6 months, that is 2nd of June, you will be required to issue, say, the invoice. You will be required to issue the invoice. So here, in this case, the invoice has been issued on which date? 25th of July. The time of supply will take place on which of date? The date of issuance of invoice or the last date when the invoice was required to be issued. So here the time of supply will take place on 2nd of June. So this way, we have discussed the issues relating to what section 12, subsection, 2, how you will be determining the time of supply in respect of goods which are covered under, say, forward charge mechanism. We were discussing the provisions relating to determination of time of supply. Now, in case the goods, they are chargeable to tax, in case the goods are chargeable to tax under reverse charge mechanism, then how the time of supply will be determined? That has been provided in section 12, subsection 3. So here, reverse charge mechanism, as you are already aware, what is the reverse charge mechanism? Where the receiver of the goods, is liable to pay GST, where the receiver of the goods is liable to pay GST. So basically, in case of supplies, in respect of which tax is liable to be paid under reverse charge mechanism. The tax is liable to be paid under reverse charge mechanism. Tax is paid or liable to be paid under reverse charge mechanism. What will be the time of supply? The time of supply, say I have the receiver of the goods, I will be required to pay tax under RCM. Therefore, what will be the time of supply? It will be the date of receipt of goods. When I receive the goods, number one is the date of receipt of goods. Number two is the date when the payment is entered. We have been entered in our books, or when the same has been debited from my bank account, which I will say earlier, payment has been entered in the books of accounts, or the payment has been debited from the bank account, whichever is say earlier. And number third is 31st day from the date of invoice. If the invoice date is 1st of October, then the 30th day will expire on 31st of October. So 31st day will be 1st of November from the date of invoice. It is earliest of the three will be what? The time of supply. So what will be the time of supply? Time of supply will be what? Time of supply will be what? In respect of goods under RCM. In respect of goods under RCM. What will be the time of supply? Number one, it is the date of receipt of goods. It is the date of receipt of goods. Number two is the date when payment is entered in books of accounts of recipient, or when the same is debited from his bank account, or when the same is debited from bank account, when it is debited from bank account, whichever is whichever is earlier when the payment is debited from his bank account, which is earlier amongst these two dates. And number third is 31st day, 31st day from date of invoice. 31st day from date of invoice. It is the 31st day from date of invoice. Say whichever is earliest amongst the same, which is the earliest basically, that will become the time of supply. So in case of supplies in respect of which tax is liable to be paid on reverse charge basis, the time of supply shall be earliest of the following dates, namely, that is the date of receipt of goods. Number one is the date of receipt of goods. Number two is the date of payment as entered in the books of accounts of the recipient, or the date on which the payment is debited from his bank account, which was earlier. Date when the payment has been, say, debited from his bank account. And number third is the date immediately following 30 days from the date of issue of invoice or any other document by whatever name called in lieu thereof by the supplier. That is 31st day from the date of invoice. Now here, if the time of supply cannot be determined as per the above provisions, if time of supply cannot be determined as per the above provisions, the time of supply will be what? The date of entry in the books of accounts of the recipient of supply. Time of supply is the date of entry in the books of accounts of the recipient of supply. So, however, where it is not possible to determine the time of supply under section 12(3)(a), b, c, then the time of supply shall be date of entry in the books of accounts of the recipient of supply, date of entry of the service, or date of entry of the goods in the books of accounts of the recipient of supply. So this way you have to determine what? The time of supply in respect of goods which are covered under reverse charge mechanism. Practical questions we will be discussing, we will discuss the remaining aspects also. Then what is 12(4)? 12(4) is it is determination of time of supply in respect of vouchers. Now vouchers are issued. So you can say Raymond cloth vouchers are there, or Lakme vouchers are there, where you can purchase specific goods only, or it can be Tanishq vouchers where we can purchase jewelry. Likewise, vouchers are there. So here in case of vouchers, it may be possible that supply is either identifiable, or it is not identifiable. Supply is, say, identifiable, or it is not identifiable. If supply is identifiable at the time of issuance of voucher, you know that this goods can be supplied against this voucher. So supply is identifiable at the time of issuance of voucher. The time of supply will be what? Date of issuance of voucher. Time of supply will be what? Time of supply will be the date of issuance of voucher. In that case, time of supply will be what? Time of supply will be date of issuance of voucher. If supply is not identifiable at the time of issuance of voucher, voucher is issued, can be used for any of the goods. The supply is not identifiable. What goods the person will take. So here the time of supply in such case will be what? The date of redemption. The date of redemption of voucher. Time of supply will be what? The date of redemption of the voucher. So that is section 12.4. Time of supply in case of supply of vouchers. Time of supply, how we are defining the time of supply in case of supply of vouchers in respect of goods. So vouchers basically means an instrument. Voucher means an instrument where there is obligation to accept it as a consideration. Where there is an obligation to accept it as a consideration or part of consideration for supply of goods or service or both. Vouchers can be for services also, vouchers can be for goods also, or for both goods and services. And where the goods or services or both are to be supplied, or the identities of their potential customers are either indicated on the instrument itself or in the related documentation, including the terms and conditions of use of such instruments. So vouchers basically means what? Voucher means an instrument where there is an obligation to accept it as a part of consideration for supply of goods or service or both, and where the goods or service or both to be supplied or identities of their potential suppliers, they are either indicated in the instrument itself or in the related documentation, including the terms and conditions of the use of such instrument, that these goods can be supplied by these manufacturers, these goods can be supplied within this much time limit. Everything is there which may be given in the voucher or in the related documents. Now here, what will be the time of supply? The time of supply in case of say vouchers, if time of supply in case of vouchers, basically if it will be what? If the supply is identifiable at the point of time when the voucher is issued, it will be the date of issuance of voucher. If supply is identifiable at the point when the voucher is issued, it will be the date of issuance of voucher. And in case if the supply is not identifiable, it will be what? The date of redemption of the voucher. It will be the date of redemption of the voucher. Then we will determine time of supply, say in residuary cases. Time of supply in, say, residuary cases. What are the residuary cases? Say where if any search is conducted and something is found out that you were engaged in supplying, you were not recording the same. So here, if periodical return is periodical return has to be filed, then what will be the time of supply? It will be the date, due date of filing the return. It will be basically TOS in that case will be what? Due date of filing the return. Due date of filing the return. It will be the due date of filing the return. And in any other case, it will be the date on which tax is paid. It will be the date on which the tax is paid. So, what is the time of supply in residuary cases? Time of supply in residuary cases. Where it is not possible to determine the time of supply as per the above provisions. Where it is not possible to determine the time of supply as per the above provisions, the time of supply shall be in case periodical return has to be filed. It is the date on which such return is to be filed. The periodical return has to be filed. It will be the date on which the return is to be filed, or in any other case, it will be the date on which the tax is paid. In any other case, it will be the date on which tax is, say, paid. Then, for example, they say that investigations reveal clandestine removal. What is clandestine removal? That you are not showing the same to the department. Concealed removal is there of the goods by a supplier who is not registered under the GST. The evidence is in the form of noting, often undated, and some corroborative material, the supplier voluntarily pays the tax during investigation to close the case. In this case, what will be the time of supply? The time of supply will be the date on which tax is paid. As being unregistered, the supplier is not required here to file the return. So in this case, when it is basically time of supply with the date, when you know the supplier is not required to file the periodical returns. Then we are having determination of time of supply, determination of TOS in case of special charges, such as if you are receiving any interest, if you are receiving any penalty, then what is the time of supply in this case? The time of supply is the time when the supplier receives such addition in value. When the supplier receives such addition in value. So basically, the time of supply to the extent, it relates to an addition in value of supply. It relates to addition in value of supply by way of interest, late fees, or penalty for delayed payment of any consideration shall be the date when the supplier receives such addition in value. What it will be the date when the supplier receives such addition in value. So this is whatever we have discussed till now. What is the time of supply of goods under forward charge mechanism? Basically, it is the date of issue of invoice or the last date on which the invoice was required to be issued. As per 12.2, it is date of issuance of invoice or last date on which the invoice was required to be issued, or date of recording the payments in the accounts of the supplier, or date when the payment has been, say, credited to his bank account, which I will say earlier. However, if you receive any advances, GST will not be required to be paid on such advances except in case of specified actionable claims. In case the goods are chargeable to tax under reverse charge, being the recipient, we are required to pay the tax, the time of supply with the date of receipt of goods, the date when the payment is entered in books of accounts of the recipient of the supply, or the date when the payment has been, say, debited from his bank account, or 31st day from the date of invoice, which I will say earlier. However, if the same is not ascertainable, then it will be what? The date of entry in the books of accounts of the recipient of goods. Then, in respect of vouchers, if supply is identifiable at the time of issuance of voucher, time of supply will be the date of issuance of voucher. But if supply is not identifiable, it will be the date of redemption of such voucher. Then in case of residual cases, in all other cases, how you will be determining the time of supply? It will be if the periodical return is required to be filed, it is what? The due date. It is the due date of furnishing of the periodical return, and in any other case, the date when the tax is paid. In any other case, the date when the tax is, say, paid. And in case of when the supplier receives any addition in value, if the supplier receives any addition in value, the time of supply is the date on which the supplier so receives the addition in value. Time of supply is the date when the supplier so receives the addition in value. So this was all about discussion. Whatever practical questions are left, now we'll be discussing the same.